back. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
Life does go on indeed. Welcome back to Boomer Life here on CIL 650. Sterling Fox in studio with Dr. Paul Zickler, the medical director at YesWellness.com. Dr. Zickler, we're talking about that list of 10 things to toss for better health. Number 10 on the list being your chair. So during the break, we're kind of giggling about this, and you said something interesting, because I was looking back to that list that you gave us, and there was an interesting statement at the very end of the part about your chair. It says, exercise cannot undo the damage caused by hours of daily sitting, just as it cannot undo the harm done by smoking. And you looked up at me and said, well, it's 2015, and sitting is the new smoking.
Right.
That's very interesting. I'd not heard that before, and I doubt many of our listeners has. So exactly what do you mean?
Well, I think that we've never really thought about our lifestyle in terms of sitting as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But if I tell you that sitting is the new smoking, all of a sudden it's in context, because we know that smoking causes cancer and causes death.
Yes.
Sitting is the new smoking. And so the data shows that the people affected by sitting and the detrimental effects of sitting in terms of causing deaths is equally or even more so than those caused by smoking. That's how important it is. And so why is that? What is sitting? I feel good sitting.
Yeah.
I may switch from this side to that side because
right.
it gets stiff,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at how we spend a day, and the average, say the average South Surrey middle-aged person that's commuting to work.
Okay.
So he gets up in the morning and he sits down and has his breakfast. He gets up, gets into the car, he drives for an hour, maybe
or
an hour or more.
Yes.
Gets to work and he sits down in his office and he looks at his computer, and he may be in that office for 10, 12 hours.
Right. Maybe a lunch break, maybe not.
Maybe a lunch break.
Maybe lunch at the desk if it's a busy day.
Yeah, or he gets up and he walks to the kitchen and sits down again.
Yeah.
And then he comes home, he drives home another hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy to pass 14, 16 hours a day sitting.
Right.
So, what's wrong with that? Well, sitting has a very detrimental physiological effect on your body. And so it increases the rate of cardiovascular disease, your risk of stroke. It increases your blood pressure. There are very interesting studies showing that if you just sit 20 minutes, that the arteries, those are the vessels that allow the blood to go from your heart to the rest of your body.
Okay.
They constrict. They actually constrict like high blood pressure. So the same effect that's being created by hypertension is created by sitting.
And the constriction causes because there's no movement. You're just
There's
sitting.
no movement.
You're in one
That's
position,
right.
and your body just kind of seizes up after a while.
Seizes up, yeah. And in the long run, it will also cause osteoporosis. It affects in terms of what enzymes are being produced and how what hormones are being elicited.
Right.
And you and because of that, you're going to gain weight.
Right. So how about a couple of practical tips for that person who still has to get from their home to downtown Vancouver? Now, they're going to sit on the SkyTrain or they're going to sit in their car. That's pretty much this. So it's in the workplace, Dr. Paul, where we can make some adjustments and we can improve our daily routine, which instead of sitting in your cubicle in front of your computer screen from 9 until noon, maybe taking a lunch break and then coming back and from 1 until 4:30, what would you recommend and how frequently would you interrupt that behavior?
Well, before we even get to that, Sterling, that fellow that's commuting, I mean, he could take his bike to the park and ride, put it on the bus, and take the bus, and then ride the short distance to work.
Okay.
I mean, just doing that would really be good. And also, instead of using the parking lot in his office just 2 floors down, use a parking lot 3 blocks away. It's going to be cheaper, and walk.
The 3 blocks
the
to
3
work.
blocks to work.
Right.
That's just some suggestions in terms of the commuter.
And save a few bucks in the process,
Yeah.
perhaps, huh?
So when he gets to work, it's really important, say every 20 minutes, just to stand up,
Just
do a few neck rolls because your neck's stiff because you're looking at your
yeah,
computer.
Of course, you're focused.
Sit down
really,
again.
And you notice that most of us will agree that after, not just even watching TV, but especially if you're stuck in front of a computer screen for any length of time, the first thing you know is your neck starts to really ache because your brain is so focused on that information on the screen.
It's tense.
So just get up and walk around.
So even if you just stand up, do a few neck rolls, maybe a few arm rotations, and sit down. But every hour of your sitting time, get up for 2 minutes and walk.
Okay.
So you walk to the kitchen, have a few words with somebody, and walk back, or go to the washroom and walk back. And if it's a coffee break, instead of going to sit down in the kitchen, take a walk around the office or around the block if you can do that. At lunchtime, don't go and to the cafeteria and sit down for the whole lunch break.
Right.
Have your lunch and then go for a 10-minute walk. And just doing that is so much better than not doing anything at all. And that quote where you said, well,
exercise can't undo
this. That's right. So even if you got up at 4:30 in the morning, went and did your hour's worth of vigorous exercise, but then you spent 14 hours sitting, that completely undid all the good that you did in that 30 minutes or 40 minutes of vigorous exercise.
Right.
And so that's what you want to think about is, you think I did it all. I got all my exercise in.
Sure.
But if you sit all that length, you've completely undid all that good that you did in the morning.
So when you get home, now you're tired, you've had a long, hot day, your brain is in overdrive, all you want to do is relax, maybe have a cocktail, have a meal, something like that, and you want to sit down, put your feet up, maybe catch the news, but you've been sitting all day already. So when you get home, what's the trick? Go for a walk around the block? Work the appetite up as if that needs any help?
If you've got kids, go and do some of their activities with them when you get home. As long as you make sure you get home from your commute, you can do that. But what's interesting, Sterling, is even if you do that little short activity, it could be 30, 40 minutes. By the time you finish, that sort of that feeling where you just want to sit down, have a beer, and sit on the couch.
Yeah.
Dissipates, and you're much more awake, and you're more alert. And you do the chores around the house, get the kids to bed, and you're awake and you're alert, and you actually want to spend some time and talk with your wife.
Now, how is it? Does it become the whole matter of exercise and movement and all of this stuff? This is boomer life. You and I are both boomers. Is it more important to be conscious of exercising as you get older, or is it really something that if you don't establish the routines in your middle years, then you're kind of hooped anyway?
Well, there's a couple of just general statements. It's never too late to start. Doesn't matter if it's when you're 30, 50, 70, 90. You're never too late to start.
Gotcha.
And any kind of exercise is good exercise.
Okay.
So you don't have to have a gym that you're in a program. I mean, just getting up and walking around the house during the day or walking around your apartment complex is a great start. And do that 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon. So a little bit of exercise is good exercise, and you're never too late to start.
But we boomers are a clever bunch, and I think I've run a couple of these by you on a previous show. And over the years, and we've had a few years to develop snappy patter and cozy excuses for our lifestyle choices. So we say things like, "Well, there's no point to exercising. I'm going to get old anyway."
Yeah, that you are going to get old, but what the idea is that we want to live out our lives in health, in being well. So we don't want to have living to be 100, but we're completely dependent on other people for our care.
Right.
We want to have a quality of life. It doesn't matter what age we reach, but we want to make it a good quality that's enjoyable.
Well, here's one that you'll no doubt heard perhaps several thousand times. Older people shouldn't exercise. They should save their strength and rest.
I love that excuse.
I mean, you have heard it more than once, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. So, and again, it's just that the inactivity just just is going to reduce the amount of wellness you're going to have, because it deteriorates. Every day you get a little bit weaker. You lose a little bit more muscle mass.
Right.
And then the next day you can't do this anymore.
Yes.
And then you find, gee, but I can hardly reach my feet to tie my shoelaces. Or if something falls down, man, I can't pick it up.
Right.
Or I'm driving the car and I can't get my neck
To
far
shoulder
enough
check
to
in the
shoulder
traffic.
check
Yeah,
the
yeah.
traffic. And so just doing those, or I get out in the garden, but I can't bend over anymore and pull out the weeds that I wanted to weed.
Sure.
It's because you're doing less every day.
Well, it's interesting because another excuse, and I know you've heard this one before, and I think as we get seriously older into our very senior years, this might apply, because some people will say, well, I'd love to get started. What you're saying makes perfect sense, but, I'm afraid of falling. I don't want to put myself in any kind of risky physical posture where I could fall and really hurt myself.
Well, that brings out 2 points. Is that if you are a boomer that has some medical conditions, it's important to check it out with your health practitioner.
Of course.
To make sure of first of all, he should be very excited that you come to ask him about exercise.
Sure, yeah.
And then to sort of incorporate any kind of advice, taking into consideration what health problems that you have. So if you're a diabetic, that might be certain adjustments in terms of your dosage and
or if
your
you're
diet.
a person in a wheelchair or with a disability.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean you can't exercise.
Yes. And you know what, Sterling? That's where you get your grandkids to help you, because there are so many very good sites on the internet where they have excellent videos. So exercising in a wheelchair, or exercising with certain disabilities, and how to do it and go about it. And that's a great way of interacting with your grandkids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, here's a great line for you to keep in mind. I know you're a grandpa, so keep this one in mind. Next time they start giving you a hard time about how slow you are to pick up on all the technology stuff, you just stop them cold and say, look, no laughing at me. I'm the person that taught you how to use a spoon. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650. Our guest is the medical director of YesWellness.com. A real pleasure to have Dr. Paul Zicler back with us on the program. And we have another guest who's going to join us right after this quick timeout.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.